Preface. Amber walked graciously down the aisle. Bray, spellbound, focused on her. She looked beautiful. The crisp white wedding dress, reflecting the sun that shone through the stained glass windows of the tiny church. For a moment, Bray almost forgot that there were other people gathered for the wedding. So intent had he been on his bride-to-be. Sitting on either side of the aisles that Amber passed were faces Bray knew all too well. His grandparents, his uncles and aunts, family members, many from other parts of the world who had come to witness this special day. But most important of all, Bray exchanged a look with his parents, his father nodding in understanding and support. They looked so well, healthy again. Bray's mother dabbed a tissue to one eye, emotional and proud of the day their elder son was going to marry, setting off on a new chapter in his life.
"Nervous?"
Martin whispered in Bray's ear. Bray turned to his younger brother, looking immaculate in a black tuxedo. "Martin, what are you doing here?"
"I'm your best man, remember?"
"No," Bray responded.
"Oh yes, brother."
Martin smiled coldly, fixing Bray's tie, adjusting it to perfection, a trace of venom in the tone of his voice. Stunned as he was to see Martin, Bray's attention once more fell on his bride, as Martin indicated Amber approaching the altar ever closer. With each step she took, Bray's heart almost faltered. He was overcome by it all. His love for Amber, the monumental day of the wedding, and the fact that so many dearly loved ones, Martin included, was somehow there to experience it with him. Behind Amber, her two bridesmaids followed, holding the long trail of the wedding gown in their hands. Their faces beaming bright smiles of their own, Patsy and Chloe were thrilled to be involved in the special day of Amber and Bray's betrothal. And then she was beside him. Amber looked up to Bray as he lifted the thin veil off her face, so she could see into the eyes of her husband-to-be. The delight on her expression was clear for all to see. It was her smile which had always captivated Bray. With that one longing look she gave him, her eyes locked on his own, her expression one of contentment, peace, togetherness. If he could freeze a moment in time forever, this would be it. Her gaze, her smile spoke volumes about the love she felt for him, reassuring him that they would always be together. No matter what happened in this God-forsaken world, everything would always be all right.
This is a day that will long be remembered.
Tai-San spoke up loudly to the assembly. Bray stared absently at Tai-San, amazed also to see her there, presiding over the ceremony. But there she was, like his brother Martin, his parents, the dearly loved friends and family who were all there around him. She was very much real, wasn't she? Or had Bray's memory betrayed him? Was he losing his mind? He certainly began to doubt his senses. He thought so many of the people had perished, yes, died. Was he now in heaven?
"It's okay,"
Amber whispered softly, clutching Bray's hands in reassurance. Feeling a little more at peace, Bray focused again on Amber, putting his faith in her, like he had always done before.
We are gathered here today for the union of Amber and Bray.
Tai-San continued.
Two spirits drawn together, destined to be united for all eternity.
Bray cast another glance at Tai-San. Beneath her smile, he noticed her eyes seemed to be cold, vacant.
Amber, do you take Bray to be your husband?
Tai-San asked.
I do.
Amber said, gazing once more longingly at Bray.
And Bray, do you take Amber to be your loving wife?
Amber waited for Bray's answer. The words she was obviously so desperate to hear, yearning in her heart from the very depths of her soul. The doubt about what was really happening resurfaced in Bray's mind. He had spotted Dal sitting in the audience. Amber's best friend from the days before the adults were wiped off the face of the earth. Dal, too, had met an untimely end. What was he doing at the wedding?
Are you all right, brother?
Martin asked quietly, so the assembled crowd could not hear.
Do you take Amber to be your wife?
Tai-San repeated once more, in a monotone, her voice almost robotic. Certainly not the spiritual and emotional Tai-San that Bray had known from his past.
Answer her, Bray.
Martin shouted out, seizing Bray by the arm. Squirming to get out of Martin's iron grasp, Bray was horrified by the realization that Martin was no longer wearing the immaculate tuxedo as before, but had turned into the visage of Zoot, complete with a leather jacket, goggles resting on his black cap, his hair long and scruffy, his eyes burning in manic intensity.
Do you or don't you take Amber to be your lawful and loving wife?
Tai-San asked again, an element of impatience and threat in the tone. Let me go! Bray shrieked out, desperate to escape from the hold of his younger yet powerful brother. Zoot clung tightly, his firm grasp restricting Bray, struggling to get away.
You're not leaving. You're staying put, brother.
Zoot yelled contemptuously.
Well?
Tai-San probed, trying to contain her anger.
Do it!
Zoot shouted. Were they going to forcibly put a wedding ring on Bray's finger? Unable to free himself, Bray was powerless. Looking on at Amber, Tai-San, the assembled loved ones who gazed impassively from the aisles, ignoring his pleas for help, assistance. Amber reached into her wedding gown, and rather than presenting a ring, she now held a long medical syringe in her hand.
Oh, I do. I do. I do. I do.
Amber repeated, carefully moving the syringe into position above Bray's arm.
Till death do us part.
Power and chaos.
Zoot roared, urging Amber on, a look of complete madness in his darting eyes, fierce with energy. Amber, no! Bray shouted out. But it was no use. Amber suddenly plunged the needle into Bray's outstretched arm, Bray yelling out in intense pain as the syringe penetrated deeply into his vein. Please help me! Amber! Bray cried out, desperate. Calmly, Amber pulled back the top of the syringe, the needle gradually drawing up blood. Terrified at what he was experiencing, Bray felt his heart racing, and he was overwhelmed with nausea at seeing Amber taking the blood sample from his arm, examining it coldly as the syringe filled up. Amber! Bray called out, trying to make contact, get through to her. It was hopeless. Amber ignored his pleas, focusing on the syringe. Martin, help me, Bray begged, looking now to his brother to see if he would help get Bray out of this nightmare. But Zoot still held onto Bray tightly, refusing to yield.
Keep going.
Zoot insisted to Amber, more blood being taken out of Bray's arm, entering into the syringe. Why? Bray cried out, tears welling up in his eyes at the cold, calculating nature of it all. The unwillingness of anyone to come to his aid. The brutality being bestowed upon him by those he cared about the most. His friends and family, Amber, his loved ones who didn't feel the same way about him, tearing him apart. Bray was feeling faint, increasingly lightheaded, yet he fought to keep consciousness, to listen to his brother's explanation for the macabre turn of events.
You are me, Bray, and I am you. We are one.
His pulse rate is high, Judd spoke calmly. But from his tone it was clear he was concerned at the health of his patient. Bray was laying on an operating theatre table, a reality space visor attached to his face. Though he was strapped down, his body convulsed, shaking, the nerve impulses causing his fingers to twitch rapidly, his head thrown from side to side by invisible forces. He was attached to a bank of monitors displaying his vital signs, pulse rate, temperature, blood pressure. 2 girls stood nearby, wearing reality space visors, the shorter of the two holding a long medical syringe in her hands, removing more blood from Bray's arm. "It's getting dangerous," Judd insisted. Dressed in white, Judd was like some mad scientist, his eyes now gazing at the complex instrumentation all around him as he stepped away from Bray, examining the equipment readings. "That's enough, for now." The taller of the girls, Eloise, agreed, reluctant to end proceedings, but submitting to the advice of Judd. Removing the reality space visor from her face, Eloise shook her head, readjusting to being back in reality. Her cold blue eyes surveyed Bray. That had been an intense session. They'd really gotten through to Bray that time. Pleased with her efforts, Eloise smiled, stroking Bray's hair reverently, taking the reality space visor off her own head. The shorter girl holding the syringe filled with blood carefully passed it to Eloise, bowing in respect to her leader, and to the deep red contents of the syringe. Judd began to unfasten Bray's own reality space visor, Bray murmuring in pain and confusion. "Brothers and sisters," Eloise called out suddenly to the viewing gallery. The operating table on which Bray lay was in the middle of a surgery theatre, bright light shining down in the centre, illuminating the patient for all to see. In the gallery, which was more like a sealed chamber divided by glass, there were about 20 observers, most about the same age as Bray. They had one thing in common, however, that united them. Every single one of them wore Zoot-style hats, complete with goggles, and they gazed at Eloise in excitement, an air of collective tension and anticipation as Eloise held the syringe in her hand up to the light. "The blood of Bray and of Zoot," Eloise uttered in awe, as if she was holding an artifact of immense value. Judd had unfastened Bray now from the bed. Bray was barely conscious. With the shorter girl assisting, the two of them supported Bray, his arms draped over their shoulders, and they began to drag him away towards the exit doors. "Martin, Amber," Bray quietly murmured in distress to himself, ravaged, tears streaming down his face. Eloise turned from Bray to face the gallery of observers. "We have communed with the Mighty One," she said, "visited his realm, the plane of other existence. Zoot will lead us. We will obey." The gallery chanted in unison in reply.
"Zoot will lead us. We will obey."
Eloise emptied the blood into a glass vial, which she held up for all to see. "The blood of the brother, the blood of Zoot," Eloise intoned, staring at the vial with fascination, her blue eyes intense. "We are of one blood. We are one with Zoot," the gallery chanted in unison in response.
"We are one with Zoot. We are one with Zoot. We are one with Zoot."
All were now staring in reverence. "He will lead and we will follow," Eloise shrieked.
"He will lead and we will follow. He will lead and we will follow."
Approaching the exit door, Bray was drifting in and out of consciousness. His body was weak, his spirits low, his mind confused, all a scramble. Repelled by the bizarre goings-on, Bray just about had the energy to turn his head to one side to look behind him. To his horror, he saw Eloise sip from the vial, blood overspilling around her lips. The gallery erupted into loud, rhythmical chants, which resonated in the medical theatre, as if shaking the very foundations of the building itself. The last thing Bray was aware of was the continuing chanting of his brother's name from the gallery before he lost consciousness. Zoot! Zoot! Zoot!
On the opposite side of the gallery, in a private viewing platform, a figure stood in the shadows surrounded by his fellow council members. They were all wearing blue flowing robes. One, the Guardian, gazed intently at the proceedings and slowly broke out into a manic smile.
Chapter 1. The little trawler pitched up and down as the ocean waves carried it ever onwards. But to where, Amber wondered, the spray from the side of the boat drifting into her face. She was standing at the stern, staring out to the endless horizon of water surrounding them in all directions. She'd always loved the sea. Her dad had taken her to the beach many times when she was a little girl, and she had an appreciation of the beauty of nature, a respect for its awesome power. Nature had a way of putting things in perspective. If this was any other occasion, Amber would have been soaking up the experience, enjoying every moment of it. The sound of the waves, the sun beaming down, bathing her in its warmth. The ocean, Amber reflected, wouldn't have changed for thousands of years. Despite the loss of the old world, the demise of the adults, this was one constant. And Amber took comfort from that, from the notion that there was one thing unchanging in this completely changed world. Amber's thoughts turned to the plight she and the others now found themselves in. She needed some time away from them, a moment alone to consider everything that had happened since they fled the city that had been their salvation. How many days had they been at sea? And where were they? Amber wondered. It must have been several weeks, with land now being a distant memory. Jack had tried to keep track of the number of days of their voyage, but as time passed, he gave up. Their close confines had led to frayed nerves. 19 of them, cramped together in a little fishing trawler designed for a crew of 8. Amber knew the situation was dire, but she and Jay tried to keep everyone else's spirits up, which was easier said than done. A feeling of unease had taken over the vessel, of pointlessness, despair. Arguments erupted over the most petty issues. Everyone got on each other's nerves. With all the bickering, it hadn't been easy for Jack to concentrate, and despite his best efforts, he hadn't made any progress in trying to work out exactly where they might be. The original plan was to head for the outer islands in Zone 4, which they calculated would be about 1,000 miles from their previous home in the city. Jack had charted a guideline course. Even at 3 miles per hour, they should have hopefully approached land within 10 to 15 days. But now their very survival was at stake. How ironic. To be on a fishing boat, but to have no fish, and hardly any food. The trawler had long ago been looted of nets, and other equipment. Celine, Jack, and Ram had tried to fashion together makeshift fishing lines, but with no bait, there hadn't been any bites so far. The only food they had was that stored on the boat by Zach, the trader who the boat belonged to back in the city. Zach had been one of May's contacts, someone she could go to if she needed any kind of supplies. And it was thanks to Zach's boat that Amber and the others had a means to embark upon their voyage. The key to the food locker had been given to Amber, voted the leader, or the captain, of the vessel by the others, and she'd been carefully rationing the small amounts of food and stored bottled water accumulated by Zach. But supplies were running dangerously low. Jack had tried to fix the fresh water issue by rigging together a rainwater collection device using a tatty plastic tarpaulin. But he'd been unable to test the ability of his invention to collect water since it hadn't rained. Water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. Amber recalled the line from Coleridge's famous poem about a doomed ship shaking her head at how cruel fate could be, putting them in such a predicament. Health was further endangered because the one toilet the boat had was blocked and was no longer working. A terrible noxious odor had begun to fill the air in the cramped cabins below. Most of the tribe had started to sleep on the outer decks. The issue of where they were going had caused many a fierce argument. When they had first escaped, Ram wanted to head out to open sea to get away from the pandemic which they thought had infected the city, to sit it out. But Amber and the others knew that their only hope for survival was to try and settle in a new land. A couple of days into the voyage, it became apparent that Zach wouldn't be any help to them in practical terms of navigating. He had admitted, bashfully, that he knew nothing about the ocean or how to sail. It wasn't even his boat originally. As always, Zach had an ability of acquiring things, items, even people. It was only by a miracle that there had been a small amount of fuel in the engines, that it hadn't been siphoned off by the locals or some other tribe in the city. Zach was a trader, not a sailor, and though the boat had been his home, he wouldn't be of any use to the mall rats in finding their way. Ram gloated at this. Surely his plan had been the better. If they had anchored a safe distance offshore, then they could have assessed matters, perhaps even explored the land along the coast. He had explained his worry that out in the ocean, they could get caught in currents and end up lost. The others agreed with Amber that staying in the region was tantamount to committing suicide. Besides, she didn't quite trust Ram and was never too sure exactly where he was coming from. Some in the party, especially Lex, blamed Ram in the first place. Had he not devised the computer program which had connected to Mega's chemical arsenal, then the Mallrat tribe, along with other tribes in the area, had a chance, however slim, of building a new world. Now they had no choice but to look for somewhere else to settle. As it became apparent that the little boat was lost, Ram had been all too eager to say, "I told you so," and had rubbed up the others, irritating them deliberately. And he clearly hoped he could persuade them to return. Without a compass, no GPS, nobody able to navigate by the stars, though Jack was trying to teach himself how, they were directionless, drifting. The only question was, to where? Amber's mantra had been to keep heading north. Her resolution was that they use the sun as it rose each day as their compass. It's how Amber had learned to keep her bearings when she was in the Eco Tribe, living in the forest, gauging where east or west was to identify the time of day, reliant on the position of the sun. The helm still worked, so they were able to at least steer the boat. Jack had thought it wise to preserve what little fuel they had. Amber agreed. The power to the engines had been cut a few days out into their voyage. The others looked to her as a leader because so often she had the right idea at the right time, a solution for every problem that confronted them in this world of no adults. But now, Amber realized that she had no solution. She was as scared as everyone else. Here they were, stuck in the middle of nowhere, supplies and morale running out. But they had no choice. And she was determined that they would survive. Somehow. Somewhere. "Amber?" Jay asked, wrapping an arm lovingly around Amber's shoulders, having just emerged from the cabin to the outer deck at the back of the trawler. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I just needed a bit of space." "Whatever happens, we will get through all this. I promise," Jay encouraged her, giving her a tender kiss on her cheek. But he sounded more convinced than he looked. The two of them stood, hugging for a moment, staring out at the endless expanse of ocean all around, confronting it, as if they would never back down from any challenge it presented.
At the bow of the boat, May patted Zach's back. He was leaning over the side of the trawler, coughing and spluttering, throwing up into the sea, again and again. He had been ill for days now. "That's it, get it all out," May encouraged, trying to help Zach. though being in such close proximity to someone vomiting was hugely unpleasant to her, her face scrunched up in disgust at the awful smell and heaving sounds coming from Zack. May had known Zack back in the city and respected him for his survivor skills. He was a rogue from the streets, like she was in many ways. A resourceful and persuasive type who somehow was able to make deals with others and come up with food, batteries, or other worthwhile items. He was a tough negotiator, and might sell his soul if he could benefit. But May liked him. She couldn't help herself. Except for pride, she had always been attracted to guys who weren't exactly squeaky clean. And she knew that somewhere within Zack's flawed psyche, he wasn't devoid of any feelings. He clearly liked her. "Has he got the virus?" Gel shouted loudly, staring at Zack and May from within the front of the cabin interior.
You better not, or else he's out of here.
Lex threatened, trying to ignore the proximity of Zack and his seasickness. Gel was sitting on the sculpted carbon fiber interior bench with Lex laying down, his head resting on Gel's lap as a makeshift pillow. "I guess the good thing about not eating is you get to lose weight," Gel said out of the blue, prompted by the rumbling of her stomach. She, like the rest of them, was always hungry, trying to get by on the small amount rationed by Amber. "At least I've got a slimmer figure," she added, glancing down in admiration of her more slender-than-ever frame.
Yeah, well, the bad thing about not eating is you die.
Lex scoffed. Sammy, along with the others, also watched May try and comfort Zack. It made Sammy heave, and he threw up all over the floor. "Man, that's gross," Daryl said, looking as if he might also vomit. "If you're going to be sick, get out there with them. Don't do it in here." Trudy stared intently at the pool of sickness spreading across the deck, and suddenly lunged, scooping some up, forcing it inside her own mouth, savoring the taste as if it was a welcome feast. Ram blurted out an uncontrollable laughter, while the others stared in a mixture of disbelief and disgust.
What the hell are you doing?
Lex asked. "Trying to survive, and I don't care how I do it. This is mine, all of it. I saw it first." Trudy spluttered, mouth full, the vomit overspilling from her mouth and drooling across her face. She forced it back in, licking her fingers.
You're welcome to it,
Lex said, gazing at Zack, who was vomiting again.
Hey, save some of that for Trudy. She's hungry.
"Shove it!" May yelled. "No, you shove it!" Ram shouted impatiently to May. "Why don't you tell your lover boy that if he owns technology, even a boat, he should have at least figured out how to use it?" "Cut it out, Ram," May countered. "If it wasn't for Zack and his boat, where would we be right now? Anywhere would be better than being stuck here on a boat full of idiots," Ram sighed to himself.
That can be solved easily, Ram.
Lex replied.
If we throw you overboard, then at least there'd be one less mouth to feed.
Ram considered Lex, realizing he was quite capable of carrying out the threat. "If you're bored, Ram," May admonished him, "go and troll somewhere else. I'm sure the sharks would appreciate you annoying them." "Ram's winding people up? Well, there's a surprise," Jay joked, trying to lift everyone's spirits as he moved inside through the cabin, with Amber beside him. She glanced at Trudy, now licking the floor. "Trudy, what on earth are you doing?" "Having some seconds of vomit," Gel said, disgustedly. Amber helped Trudy up and sat her back on the bench. "I know how you must feel, Trudy, but that's not the way. Come on now. Everything's going to be all right. There'll be enough food and water for everyone, as long as we keep rationing it."
If not, we'll just have to look for other things on the menu,
Lex suggested, casting a threatening glance at Ram, who ignored it, but felt deep within that he wouldn't put it past Lex to resort to cannibalism. With dry lips, a thumping headache, but an iron will not to give up, Amber had called the tribe for a meeting. Every few days, the group met up to go over their plight, see if anyone had any ideas to improve their situation. Amber was above all concerned that with Ram's descent, she could have a mutiny on her hands. She wanted to keep everyone focused and calm, especially Trudy. She was never the type that needed much encouragement to panic with her histrionics. Sammy was asked to join Lottie, who had already taken Trudy's daughter, Brady, and Amber's baby to the cabin below so that the rest of the tribe could meet, despite his protestations at being a babysitter.
Sorry I'm late.
Ebony said, reaching the top of the stairs leading into the main cabin area. She was followed by Slade. There was a cool and tense air between them. Make yourself comfortable, Jack said, a hint of humor in his voice. They were all so cramped, squished together in the cabin, that there was little room for them all.
Mind if I sit here?
Ebony asked Slade, settling next to him.
Do what you want. What do I care?
Slade replied, coldly. The others could see that their relationship was still strained and that they must have been arguing. The meeting went ahead, and once again Ram stated, strongly, that they should turn the boat around and head back in the direction they had come from, intent as ever to return to their old home in the city. Ram was outvoted. The overwhelming majority chose to keep following Amber's recommendation, sure that they were bound to reach land eventually. We might be dead by then, Ram cautioned. You have such a way with words, Celine admonished him, while discreetly indicating Trudy, who was staring vacantly into the distance, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't feel so good, she said, her voice a fragile, hoarse whisper. Celine sat beside her, trying to provide some emotional support. Trudy had been on a roller coaster ride of emotions of late. Amber and the others were always aware of her vulnerable state and mood swings, even at the best of times. Amber suspected that she probably suffered from clinical depression. She had been through so many traumatic experiences in her young life, and always found it difficult to cope. She needs a drink, Ellie suggested.
We all need a drink.
Lex said.
I could sure do with a shot of Jack Daniels.
Same here, Lexi boy, Ram quipped, eager to ingratiate himself to Lex. And Trudy here looks like she needs a psychiatrist. That's enough, Ram, said Amber, stepping forward, offering Trudy Amber's meager water ration. Celine held the bottle to Trudy's lips, but Trudy didn't seem to notice it there. She was lost as if in a vision, in another world, her eyes transfixed. What's up with her? Gal asked no one in particular, as Trudy suddenly began to sob uncontrollably, her shoulders heaving. We should get her downstairs, Amber said, concerned for Trudy's well-being, thinking she might feel better if she rested for a while. Celine tried to encourage Trudy to stand up, Ellie going to the other side of Trudy to support her. Get your hands off me! Trudy wailed hysterically. Trudy, it's gonna be okay, Celine whispered. Come on, Trudy. Try and keep it together, Amber said. Everything is gonna be fine. No, it's not. You know it and I know it, Trudy screamed. We are doomed, all of us. We're all going to die.